Welcome to the Rise Inside podcast, hosted by Justin Starbird and powered by Rise Robotics. Listen as host Justin talks to experts from the Rise team about topics relating to mechanical engineering, industrial design, commercialization, and innovation. True collaborations work when ideas are integrated at inception to solve significant problems. Rise Inside brings together how the team continues to work with great folks to commercialize ideas. You're listening to the Rise Inside podcast. Here's your host, Justin Starbird.
Welcome back to Rise Inside. My name is Justin Starbird, and today I got a special treat for everybody. This is going to be different. I've got the Vice President of Business Development, Ken Gray from Rise with me. Ken, welcome back.
Thank you. Hey, and I guess we'll have to let our audience decide if this is a treat or not, but we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to let me host the Rise Inside podcast today, and my guest is going to be Justin Starbird, who's the CEO of the Aebli Group and a longtime friend and colleague. And so I get to say, Justin, welcome to the Rise Inside podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's interesting to have the roles reversed.
Yeah, you do this so well that, and I mean that most sincerely. I'm not going to compare myself to you, but I am going to enjoy this, and you play a very important role for Rise Robotics and other businesses that you work with. So, what I'd really like to do is start off with just the basic question: is who is the Aebli Group? And what's your role?
We started a series here to learn more about the Aebli Group. Affectionately, we call ourselves the TAG team, and it started with my eldest daughter saying, "Daddy, what do you do all day?" And I turned it around on her and I said, "Well, what do you think I do all day?" And she goes, "Well, I don't see you do much. You're just on the phone all the time." And what was funny is most everybody was sitting within earshot as she's interviewing me, because we went. I know this is just audio, but we were.
Can I interview her? Can we interview her? That would be fantastic.
She was awesome. So she wrote down the same thing, 6 or 7 questions to ask me about. What do I do all day? What is TAG? And it was highly entertaining because. It was just nice to get her perspective of what it is and what I do. She had unfortunately had that COVID vacation, so she was coming out of it and she was following the protocols, but no longer ill or feeling under the weather. So she stayed in the office with everybody, and so she came up with the idea that she wanted to talk to me about it. And quite simply, we work with companies to help them tell their story and sell more stuff. At the end of the day, we're the team down the hall. We're a full service marketing and business development agency, and that means something different to every client. And that's why we're never a one size fits all for our partners. So for what we do for Rise and what we do for others, can be 2 different scopes of work. But at the end of the day, the idea is that we want to help you amplify, your story, share it, and, create actionable results that lead to more business.
So what's kind of a minimum level of involvement that you would have with a business? So, give me some sense of what the spectrum is. What's the entry level TAG involvement? What's the full Monty?
Yeah, sure. So full Monty, going way back on that, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to start it.
You're going to tell me where? Yeah, I just dated myself there, didn't I? Sorry.
That's Shoot. Okay. As a full service agency, we do everything from content development, social media, graphic design, web development, web design. Even into videography, so video production and animation, and everything in between, right? So a minimum level is picking maybe 1 or 2 of those services and us helping you with them. So we have one client, a very high tech customer out in based in California, and they build the platform for which the edge of the network is built on. So think of like, Verizon or other AT&T. When they build their network, they build it on top of this platform. And so to tell that story is very, very challenging. So we do like explainer videos for them and some animation and those sorts of things. And then, we have a medical device design company based in New Jersey that, we do their newsletter, an interview series kind of like this, blogs and so forth. And I'd say those are more on the minimum scale. And then, for a company like Rise, where, we assist in all elements of the business, everything from putting, the marketing calendar together for the year through to assisting and, making appointments for, you guys to close and vet out. So, it's everything in between. The Aebli Group, we've pivoted a couple of times over the years. When I started out, it was much more about
which was when.
Well, TAG started in 2014. Prior to that, I had started several companies that didn't get off the ground nearly as well as I had hoped.
We call those learning experiences.
Yeah,
Justin.
Absolutely. So, prior to the Aebli Group, I had a company called East Bay Marketing Group. I had a partner. Things didn't work out for the two of us, and I started TAG. Before that, many people don't realize I had Starbird Energy. I had Starbird Global, doing different things, all through a lot of relationships that I still have today. But the Aebli Group started in 2014. I was going out on my own. The partner and I decided to go in different directions. And I was trying to think of, okay, well, what would be a good start? Why the Aebli Group? What does that mean? And I got thinking, and when I was really young, I had a mentor, Jim Aebli, who was involved in, more in vacation ownership, timeshare, those sorts of things. And even though I was young, it was a $20-30 million company, and he brought me into the boardroom, had me go to meetings with him. And he was in a similar role as you are, sitting with the ownership group and charged with growing the business. And so we'd go to meetings and he'd say, all right, I need you to go there and take notes. And, inevitably he was so well prepared for each meeting, but what he needed was actually to be able to come back out of it and then, go back with counters, right? Or, hey, I want you to pay attention to the decision maker. And when I'm going to say this or bring up this topic, I want you to see what their reactions are. And so here I am 20, 21, 22, 20, my early 20s, learning how to read people. Yeah. And seeing how they react to, different pieces. And then, when they're under pressure, when things aren't going well, I was doing that in as the housing boom crashed in 2007, 2008 in California and in Florida, where it both got hit the hardest. And here we are trying to sell timeshare. And, what was crazy was people were still purchasing it because of the idea of it, right? Like something, you can't put a price on memories. You can't put a price on experiences. And so fast forward 2014 and then starting the Aebli Group. In the meantime, I'd also had 2 children, and Jim had passed away of cancer. So I named both of my daughters, their middle names are Aebli. And so as I'm thinking of, how to start the business, creating a story, creating something that resonates with people, and also, something that would be unique, that's how the Aebli Group was born. So it was an ode to my 2 daughters, who are now 11 and 9, and my good friend Jim, who passed away.
I thank you for that. I didn't, as long as I've known you, I did not know that story. Yep. That's a great story. So did you ever satisfy your daughter about what you do as as the leader of tag?
I don't think so. I don't think you ever do, right? Your kids always are like, oh, okay, that's not cool, you know? But you know, this is what we do, right? I mean, you know, you come up with stories that resonate, you come up with ways in which to, you know, get your message in front of eyeballs that are going to make a difference for you. And at the heart of what we do, I mean, that's it, right? And then, again, you know, setting those ideas up and getting them out there, distributed, and then, you know, also coaching, right? I mean, a lot of your role is talking to leadership and the team about how they can, you know, improve what they're doing, you know, make better use of their time, you know, and be better at their jobs. And so, you know, I consult with CEOs all the time that are great operators. They're really good in their business, but they don't necessarily know how to talk about it. And so, you know, that's what I do for them too.
Do you see the role of tag being significantly different, whether the business is small or large? Because you work with a pretty wide spectrum in terms of sizes of businesses.
Sure. Yes and no. You know, to a degree, we're always trying to improve our process. We're always trying to improve the client's process. We're always trying to look at problems from their perspective, even if it makes our job more difficult, whether they're big or small. We tend to be a lot more, I don't want to say important for smaller businesses, but we represent a larger spend. We represent with smaller companies, startups, we tend to work more with like specific leadership. You know, the CEO tends to be that dynamic force that moves mountains to make things happen and get things done. And, you know, they just need another person to be out there with them. And so, you know, in that respect, yes, our role is a lot more intimate. The larger the company, you know, a lot of times there are, you know, managers or directors that are charged with that. And it's maybe not quite so passionate. It becomes a little bit more of a 9-to-5 kind of role. And that's not a bad thing. What it means, it's much more prescriptive instead of, you know, creative. And that's okay, because what we do for them, you know, brings the passion out of the people, right? And brings the passion out of the team and really involves the whole group. And that, I think, is what is so fun, because, you know, what we're doing here, this podcast series for Rise, even, you know, the idea is that I can't get Aaron Acosta or Blake Sessions to write an 800-word blog for us, right? I'm not, that does not
not happening. It's not going to happen. No.
Absolutely not. So, you know, if we can sit there though, and for 20 minutes, you know, understand, you know, what their process for, you know, solving problems is, and I can pull that out of them. Well, now all of a sudden that can become a whole series of things. And so we came up with this, you know, I wish I could take credit for the whole thing, but, you know, I follow guys in the industry, women in the industry that are in marketing and business development, and try to implement some of their ideas that they share. So Gary Vaynerchuk is a serial entrepreneur, incredible person. You know, wish I had opportunity to meet him more often, but you know, he creates a single piece of content and uses it in, I think he says 62 or 64 different places at a time. So if we can, you know, maybe not everybody can afford VaynerMedia as their, you know, agency of record, but that doesn't mean they don't deserve to have their story told. I mean, Rise is a great example of that you're literally changing an entire, you know, staple industry worldwide, and we deserve to have that out there. So what we try to do is take those bits of information, talk to the people that are making it happen, and, you know, share that and do that through the interview process, turning that into a transcript, making a blog out of it, creating a theme that will become eventually a white paper, and then take bits and pieces, and that becomes social media. And then not only that, but then sharing each of those pieces so that we can bring on new investors, that you can, you know, share with potential clients, you know, pieces of the business that they wouldn't have access to otherwise. And that happens whether it's a startup or it's a multinational conglomerate. And we're fortunate to be able to work with both and hear the passion from the folks that make those businesses successful.
Nothing quite like the power of a good story, especially when you can cascade it across all these different, outlets, social media outlets for us. So among the things you're doing for Rise, we're sitting here on the Rise Inside podcast, which is one of the things that TAG does a great job of organizing for us. Talk about, if you would, some of the other things, the other ways that you're involved and with us. I probably don't even know all of them, Justin.
Well, and to be fair, we have a great team here at the Aebli Group. Lauren Damon, Jessica Cummings, Aaron Cobb, Ryan Collette. We just brought in Rebecca Reed and her team to do some video stuff. So, we're across all channels right now. I know we're working closely with business development to, vet out potential deals and talk to folks that are, you and I talked previously on podcast where I interviewed you about the business development side of things and really the need to work with people that want to take a chance on this, right, for lack of a better term, and not having time for folks that don't see the fit. And so every day, Lauren and Aaron Acosta go through, potential opportunities and then set up appointments and do those things. Jess works really hard on taking the interviews that I do and, making them interesting, putting them out there on all of our social channels for Rise. And now, talking about partnerships, which I think is so unique to the Rise space. You're, as I say, in the dual use technology. So it's both commercial and then for the US government in different ways, being able to tell those stories. So now on the partnership side, we're working with one of your biggest partnerships, Anthony Liftgates, to, help promote the success of the new product that's coming out. So that's a big deal. So we have video going into production next week to be able to start that process as well. And I'm sure I'm forgetting lots of different things or stuff that I can't talk about. But,
yeah. But the Anthony Liftgates one, I'm glad you brought up because I would have had you not, but that one's incredibly important for them and for Rise as well, because that's the first real broad application of Rise cylinder in a commercial application. And the more adopters we have, the more adopters we will have.
Yep.
And so that one's super important. The other one that I would talk about is just the management of the sales funnel process and the CRM itself, both on the commercial side. And as you alluded to, we track potential investors as well and make sure that we use our CRM to make sure that we're speaking with them on a planned and make sure that everybody gets the time that they deserve. Hey, you and I we mentioned earlier, you and I are, got our introduction to one another working with some really innovative companies. Yep. And so I've always been interested in what your perspective is on, how do you define innovation and then what do you see is the future for Rise and going forward? What do you think's coming next? What's in your crystal ball?
Man, yeah. Well,
sorry. Yeah, I know. I don't. I get to ask the questions
this
time instead of answer them.
Well, we did come from a background that celebrated innovation, and it continues to celebrate innovation. We're and that's such a cool experience. And as you alluded to on the previous podcast, I got to take your favorite picture of all time with Astro Teller. So
yeah, exactly.
So sitting in that seat where I oversaw, essentially business development for a group, the Edison Awards previously, I was privy to new exciting technologies that were coming out all the time. You would see areas of the world and problems being solved that, I didn't even know existed. Rise is a great example of that. Prior to having that introduction, who knew that hydraulics were, on the cusp of being, completely either eradicated or radically changed. And change is coming, whether, the hydraulic companies want it or not, right? And so, sitting here and trying to define innovation is so difficult, because it's one of those things where I think when you see something new and different, and it's almost like the aha moment, right? And it's, why wouldn't anybody do that? Why wouldn't everybody do that? And what I think you say, it's elegant mathematics and practical design. And that's kind of the whole definition of innovation too, because it's got to be simplified. And that part, those are the ingredients I see in Rise that make it so transcendent. So, my crystal ball for Rise is not hyperbole at all, and that it's going to change industries, right? And what's so unique right now is that we're literally going one by one, gaining adopters, and it's almost like, converts, right? It's like we're out there knocking on doors saying, hey, this is something better, unique, and different. And we're screaming on a top of a one-story rooftop in the middle of downtown Manhattan. There's not a lot of we're not getting a lot of the attention yet, but we also have the contracts for the skyscrapers coming. And it'll be it'll be really, really fascinating to see. We have one contract that is soon to be announced publicly, that got word of today prior to this interview, which is going to change the company dramatically. And pretty soon we'll have that billboard, proverbial billboard, in Times Square. And I think that is what is so cool, is that we're kind of on the ground floor of something that is radically going to change the space around us. I mean, I'm sitting in my office right now, and outside I've been, listening to bulldozers and, dump trucks and backhoes moving. They're building a high school around the corner, and the property is adjacent to it. So we have a full view of it every day. And just to know that that space could change very quickly as well. And I know there's a test here for Rise that will be public in a couple of weeks as well, where you're going to break some incredible records for weight thresholds that have just never been done. And so to know on the inside, pun intended, that we have the insight to see that. I mean, we couldn't be in a better position or have a better opportunity to be able to, be a partner in this.
Yeah, you mentioned the billboard in Times Square. I'd like to get that feeling again, Justin. I mean, from personal experience, past product, been on the big board in Times Square. I think it's coming again, but with a Rise Robotics brand identity on it this time. So let's what do you think is on the horizon for TAG? I do want to do one thing. I want to compliment your team, because you have some amazing people on your team who work I work I should say hour by hour with Lauren Damon, who you mentioned, who's terrific, and Jess, and we worked with Rebecca on the videography side before. Fantastic. You just have a tremendous team. What do you think's next on and they, by the way, do all the work that you take credit for. I mentioned that in the podcast.
It's so easy to sell stuff talk about services when you're so confident in the people behind them. And I think that's what, is next for us is, continuing to find great people to add, because this isn't an easy place to work. It's not easy to treat every client as if they're your own, right? If it was a family business and everybody had a stake in it or something, then I guess it's the same. But that's the feel that we have. That's the culture that we've built, is that each of our clients, we treat as if we're spending our own money on it, and that's the type of person that works here, and that's not easy to find, especially today. I mean, they call it the Great Resignation, people moving all the time. I've been fortunate to not have dealt with that. I try to treat people well, and for me, the best idea always wins. And I don't always have the best ideas, and so I think everybody has ownership in the projects that we have and what we do. So what's next is, continuing to build on that success. I think that's where we're at next is, we're really good in the transportation and logistics space. That's how, you and I came to meet. But we're also really good in the med tech and medical device space. And that's interesting because although they're not specifically intertwined, they each have a really challenging story to tell and restrictions that are put on them, either industry standards or otherwise. And you also tend to have really intelligent people at the helm that are great operators, right? They're people that, men and women that just roll their sleeves up and get the work done and figure out a way to do it, whether it's, by themselves or through their teams. And they're too busy to tell everybody else how great they are. And so, we've kind of found this niche in those spaces to really help out. And because of our previous experience, it resonates with folks. And I think that's really exciting because, again, talking about where you and I came from and met before, the folks that we're working with are continuing to solve the world's problems that you didn't know were problems. And that is so cool.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Well, thank you. That's great perspective. Thanks for taking time with me. So, Justin, if our listeners want to learn more about the Aebli Group, how do they find you?
Well, it's funny because everybody, spells it incorrectly. It's actually Aebli Group, and that's our website, aebligroup.com. That's probably the best place to find us. The other thing is, if you're listening to the podcast, you can listen to many other episodes and hear, about the work that's being done by Rise and our other clients, and just do a quick search in the Google search bar for us as well.
Outstanding. Well, thank you. Thanks for letting the shoe be on the other foot today and letting me be the interviewer, Justin. I really appreciate your time today, and thanks to everyone.
You have been listening to the Rise Inside podcast, presented by Rise Robotics. On behalf of our guest today and host Justin Starbird, thank you for listening. Please share your feedback on our LinkedIn page, linkedin.com/company/rise-robotics.